Approach vector confirmed. Announced the ship's AI. Its voice emotionless but efficient. Ambassador Leo, you are cleared for descent. Raphael's stomach tightened. This wasn't diplomacy. It was theater. He was here to endure public chastisement, a calculated risk to serve a greater cause. He tapped a small communicator embedded in his sleeve. Ground team, stand by. Copy that, came the curt reply from an unseen operator. As the shuttle descended, Raphael rehearsed his script. He knew the Council would not welcome humanity's voice. To them, humans were the newcomers, unrefined, too volatile, too independent. And yet, that was precisely why he had come. The council chamber was as grand as it was oppressive, a vast amphitheater where representatives from dozens of species occupied tiered seats that gleamed like liquid metal. At the center sat the Goran delegation, their leader, Archon Tarek, reclining in a throne-like chair. The Goran were a towering, reptilian species with scales that shimmered in hues of gold and crimson. Tarek's predatory gaze swept over the room before settling on Raphael with a faint curl of disdain. Ambassador Leo of Earth, the Archon announced, his voice a resonant growl that silenced the murmurs of the crowd. You stand before the Council to account for your people's recklessness. Humanity's history is one of war, consumption, and chaos. Do you truly believe such a species deserves its place among the stars? Raphael's boots echoed as he stepped forward to the podium, the spotlight above casting his figure in stark relief. He felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes, some curious, others openly hostile. He let the silence linger, allowing the Council's anticipation to curdle into discomfort. We are far from perfect, Raphael began, his voice steady but deliberate. Humanity has stumbled, yes. We've faced conflict and we've made mistakes. But those struggles have forged us into something stronger, resilient, adaptable, qualities that this union should value. A low rumble of discontent rippled through the chamber. Tarek raised a clawed hand, silencing the murmurs with a gesture. Adaptable, resilient, a flattering spin on a history of savagery. Raphael's jaw tightened, but he pressed on. Our history has also been one of innovation, cooperation, and hope. When Earth united to overcome its challenges, we— Enough! Tarek's roar cut through Raphael's words. You dare to lecture this council on unity? Your kind has contributed nothing of worth to the galaxy. You bring only hubris and instability. Laughter erupted from sections of the chamber, particularly from the Goran allies. Raphael's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to remain composed. This was part of the plan. Every insult, every sneer, each was another brick in the foundation he was quietly building. From the corner of his eye, Raphael noticed a figure in the shadows of the lower tiers. It was called Tyr, a wiry Serrani with shimmering green skin and angular features. The Serrani were a subjugated species, their culture stripped away by the Goran's expansionist policies. Kaltir's eyes met Raphael's briefly, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. Sympathy? Acknowledgement? Whatever it was fleeting. I did not come here to argue, Raphael said, his voice sharper now. I came to remind this council that humanity's presence among the stars is not a threat. It is an opportunity. Together, we can build something greater. Tarek leaned forward, his golden scales catching the light. You speak of opportunity, as though you possess leverage, Ambassador. Let me make this clear. Humanity's position here is not a matter of your choosing. It is the Council's, and we are not impressed. The Archon pressed a button on his armrest. A holographic display flickered to life above the chamber, showing Earth in stark relief. Its wars, its polluted oceans, its struggling cities. The narrative was clear. Humanity was an unworthy blight, a parasite clawing its way into a pristine galaxy. Raphael's stomach churned, but he did not flinch. Instead, he straightened, letting the holograms play out without interruption. Let them see the truth, he thought. Let them see where we've been and where we're going. When the projection ended, Tarek's voice boomed again. Behold the legacy of humanity. Does this council see a species worthy of standing among us? A chorus of dissenting murmurs filled the air, but among them, Raphael caught whispers from smaller delegations. Words of doubt, words of unease. The Gorn's display had been meant to humiliate, but for some, it only highlighted the Union's heavy-handedness. Raphael turned to face the assembly, his tone calm but firm. You've made your judgment clear, Archon. Yet history has a way of surprising even the most certain of rulers. Humanity will prove its worth. Not through words, but through action. Empty rhetoric, Tarek sneered, waving a claw dismissively. This session is adjourned. Remove the ambassador. 2 armored Goran guards stepped forward, their massive forms blocking Raphael's path. He allowed them to escort him out, his face an unreadable mask. Behind him, the council chamber erupted into fragmented conversations, the Archon's voice rising above the din to restore order. As the heavy doors closed behind him, Raphael exhaled, the weight of the performance finally lifting. Kaltir emerged from a shadowed alcove, his movements quick and furtive. They overplayed their hand, Kaltir whispered, his voice low and urgent. Many in there saw the truth today. The question is whether they'll act on it. Raphael nodded, his lips curling into the faintest smile. They will. And if they don't, we'll make them. Together, they disappeared into the labyrinthine corridors of the station, leaving the council chamber and its fragile facade of unity behind. The air was dense with humidity as Raphael Leo slipped through the dimly lit underbelly of the Galactic Union's capital station. Here, beneath the polished floors and gleaming spires, the reality of the Union's domination festered. The shadows clung to the walls like cobwebs, and the faint hum of machinery was the only sound, masking whispers of rebellion. Raphael's pulse quickened as he neared a narrow maintenance tunnel. A figure emerged from the darkness, his angular features catching the faint glow of a flickering overhead light. Kaltir, a Serrani insurgent, was shorter than Raphael but wiry, his emerald skin marred by a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jaw. His sharp, amber eyes darted around before locking onto Raphael. "You're late," Kaltir hissed, his voice as sharp as a serrated blade strapped to his thigh. "I had to make a theatrical exit," Raphael replied evenly, glancing over his shoulder. "And I didn't exactly have time to dawdle with Goran guards breathing down my neck." Kaltir grunted but said nothing more, gesturing for Raphael to follow. They moved deeper into the maze of tunnels, their footsteps muffled by layers of grime and rust. Finally, they reached a concealed hatch. Kaltir pressed a sequence of buttons on a panel, and the door hissed open, revealing a small chamber crowded with figures of varying shapes and sizes. The room smelled of sweat and ozone, the telltale signs of overworked bodies and barely functional technology. The gathered aliens represented a spectrum of oppressed species. The Serrani, with their chameleon-like skin, the hulking Tuster-Carry, their mining scars visible even through thick hides, and the wiry Eurathians, their elongated heads housing the sharpest minds in the galaxy. They fell silent as Raphael entered, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. Kaltir stepped forward, raising a hand. "This is Raphael Leo, human diplomat. Yes, but more importantly, the catalyst we've been waiting for." A tall Drakari stepped forward, his tusks gleaming in the dim light. "You expect us to trust a human?" His voice was a low rumble, like a distant landslide. "What do they know of suffering under the Union's boot?" Raphael held his ground, meeting the Drakari's gaze. "Humanity may be new to this galaxy, but oppression is something we know all too well. My people fought their way out of tyranny to stand where we are today. And now, we're ready to help others do the same." "Words," spat the Drakari. "The Council uses words, too. They brought nothing but chains." Raphael took a step closer, his voice low but firm. "Chains break, but only if we work together. You've all seen how the Council operates. They divide us. They keep us weak by keeping us apart. The Goran humiliated me today not because they fear humanity, but because they fear what we could inspire. A murmur rippled through the room, a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Raphael pressed on. The footage of today's session is already circulating. The smaller species, the ones watching from the margins, they saw what you saw. An empire lashing out to maintain control. We can use that, but only if we unite. Kaltir placed a hand on Raphael's shoulder, signaling him to pause. Not everyone here is convinced, he said, his voice cautious. And there's a reason for that. There's an informant among us. The room tensed. Whispers turned to accusations, eyes darting from one face to another. Raphael raised a hand to silence them. We'll deal with traitors when they reveal themselves. Right now, we focus on the mission. And what exactly is your mission, human? Asked an Eurathian, his voice cool and skeptical. You talk of unity, but words alone will not bring down the council. Raphael pulled a small hollow projector from his pocket, activating it to display a schematic of the station. Red dots marked key council infrastructure, communication hubs, energy relays, and security checkpoints. This station is their nerve center, he explained. It's where they control their fleets, suppress uprisings, and silence dissent. If we disrupt it, just for a moment, it will send shockwaves across the galaxy. Kaltir stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Raphael's plan is bold, but it's the spark we need. If we hit these targets simultaneously, it will force the Goran to divert resources from their occupied territories. That's when we rally the other species to strike. The Drakari grunted, his massive arms crossed. And what happens when they retaliate? They'll burn our worlds to ash. They might try, Raphael said, his tone cold. But rebellions thrive on courage, not fear. They've already pushed you to the brink. What more do you have to lose? Silence fell over the room, heavy with unspoken truths. The Drakari stepped back, his gaze unreadable. Slowly, one by one, the rebels nodded their agreement. Kaltir turned to Raphael, his expression unreadable. You've convinced them for now. But remember, trust here is fragile. Raphael nodded. That's why I'll lead the first strike. The meeting dissolved, the rebels dispersing into the tunnels with hushed voices. Raphael lingered, examining the holographic schematics while Kaltir stood nearby, arms crossed. You're taking a risk, Kaltir said quietly. Making yourself a target like this. I knew the risks when I took this job, Raphael replied without looking up. If this works, the galaxy will see what the Council truly is. A house of cards waiting to fall. Kaltir studied him for a long moment. You're different from the others we've worked with. Most diplomats would have run after what happened today. Raphael finally looked up, his eyes sharp. I'm not just a diplomat. Kaltir smirked faintly, though there was no humor in it. Let's hope that's enough. As they parted ways, Raphael made his way back through the tunnels, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. He had gambled everything on this fragile alliance, and the stakes were rising with every moment. Somewhere deep within the labyrinthine corridors, a comm unit embedded in his sleeve vibrated. A voice crackled through the line. Phase 2 preparations complete. Awaiting your signal. Raphael hesitated for a beat, his pulse steady despite the enormity of what lay ahead. Good. Stay ready. He ended the transmission and stepped into the faint glow of an access shaft, the station's endless corridors stretching before him. The Council thought it had silenced him today, but they had only made his voice louder. The oppressed would rise, and Raphael would make sure of it. The rebellion's first strike was a whisper, not a roar. It began with flickers of disruption across the Galactic Union's capital, a power surge in the lower districts, a sudden failure of security scanners at key checkpoints, and encrypted messages slipping through the Union's supposedly impenetrable networks. Small acts of sabotage, seemingly unconnected, but each orchestrated by Raphael Leo and his growing coalition of dissidents. Raphael stood in a cramped communications room deep within the station's maintenance sector, Holographic displays illuminated his face, highlighting the lines of tension etched into his expression. Around him, Kaltir and a handful of rebel leaders gathered, their focus fixed on the screens displaying reports from across the station. "We're gaining traction," Kaltir said, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. "The Serani workers are refusing to load Goran supply ships. The Drakari miners have seized control of their barracks. It's not open rebellion yet, but the cracks are forming." Raphael nodded, his gaze still on the screens. "It's a start, but we need more than cracks. We need an avalanche." A Serani technician, her hands darting over a console, interrupted. "The footage from the council chamber, it's spreading. Independent networks are broadcasting it to colonies on the outskirts. They're calling you the voice of defiance." Raphael allowed himself a faint smile. The humiliation he had endured in the council chamber was no longer a private wound. It was a rallying cry. Across the galaxy, oppressed species were seeing what the Union had tried to suppress. The Gorans' arrogance, their dismissal of voices like his, and the simmering anger of those they deemed inferior. "Good," Raphael said. "Let them watch. Let them remember how the Council treats anyone who dares to speak up." The plan's next phase demanded precision and secrecy. Raphael and Kaltir led a small team to one of the station's communication hubs, a sprawling structure buried within the station's core. It pulsed with energy, its walls lined with conduits carrying encrypted data streams to every corner of the galaxy. The group crouched in the shadows of an access tunnel, their breathing shallow as they observed the guards patrolling the hub's entrance. The guards, hulking Goran soldiers clad in iridescent armor, moved with the disciplined lethargy of those who believed they were untouchable. Kaltir glanced at Raphael, his expression tight. "We take out the guards silently, plant the transmitter, and get out. Quick and clean." Raphael unsheathed a compact disruptor pistol, its sleek design a stark contrast to the brutal weapons favored by the Goran. No room for error. If they catch wind of this, they'll lock down the entire station. The rebels moved with practiced precision, their steps soundless on the metallic floor. Kaltir dispatched the first guard with a serrated blade, the weapon slipping between armor plates with deadly efficiency. Raphael took aim at the second, his disruptor firing a silent pulse of energy that left the alien crumpled on the ground. "Clear," Kaltir murmured, motioning for the team to advance. Inside the hub, the air buzzed with the hum of machinery. The rebels worked quickly, planting a compact transmitter among the conduits. The device was programmed to amplify Raphael's message, broadcasting it across secure Union frequencies. For a brief window, the Council's propaganda would be drowned out by the voice of rebellion. "Done," the Serani technician whispered, sealing the transmitter in place. "We're live in 5. As they retreated, Raphael felt a surge of anticipation. This wasn't just about disrupting the Union. It was about lighting a fire. His speech from the council chamber, coupled with images of the rebellion's small victories, would show the galaxy that resistance was not only possible but inevitable. The council's response came swiftly and brutally. The Goran mobilized enforcers to crush the growing unrest, raiding suspected rebel hideouts and broadcasting threats of severe retaliation. Public executions of captured insurgents were streamed across Union networks, a chilling display meant to cow the dissidents into submission. In their hidden base, Raphael watched one such broadcast with a grim expression. A Serani miner knelt before a Goran officer, his defiant gaze meeting the camera even as the officer raised an energy blade. The screen went black a moment later, but the image burned into Raphael's mind. "They're trying to scare us," Kaltir said, his voice hard. "But it won't work. They don't realize fear is a fuel, not a deterrent." Raphael's fists clenched at his sides. "We have to push harder. If we stop now, they'll hunt us to extinction." A Drakari rebel stepped forward, his tusks glinting in the dim light. "Our people are ready to fight, but they need to see that victory is possible. The Union's forces are overwhelming. What's your plan, human?" Raphael turned to the hollow map projected in the center of the room, his mind racing. We can't fight them head-on, not yet. But if we hit their infrastructure, we can cripple their ability to respond. Their overconfidence is their weakness. They believe they're untouchable. We'll prove them wrong. That night, Raphael sat alone in a corner of the base, reviewing intelligence reports and refining the next steps. The weight of the rebellion bore down on him, a constant reminder of the stakes. His communicator buzzed softly, breaking the silence. A familiar voice crackled through the line. This is Fleet Command. Phase 2 preparations are complete. Awaiting your orders. Raphael hesitated, his thoughts briefly flickering to Earth, to the friends and colleagues he had left behind, to the impossible choice he had made when he agreed to this mission. He exhaled slowly, steeling himself. Proceed, he said, but maintain discretion. We can't afford mistakes. As the line went silent, Kaltir approached, his footsteps light. You should rest. Tomorrow will be worse than today. Raphael shook his head. There's no time for rest. Not until this is over. Kaltir smirked faintly, though his eyes betrayed a weariness of his own. You're relentless. I'll give you that. But don't burn yourself out before the final push. Raphael didn't respond. Instead, he returned his focus to the holomap, the faint glow reflecting in his determined gaze. The rebellion was gaining momentum, but he knew the hardest battles lay ahead. The Council's grip on the galaxy was strong, but so was the resolve of those rising against it. And Raphael Leo would see to it that their flames burned brighter than the Council's shadow. The Galactic Union's capital station was a symphony of chaos. Alarms wailed. Crimson lights bathed the corridors in ominous flashes, and Goran enforcers scrambled to contain the pandemonium erupting across its decks. For Raphael Leo, this was the moment he had gambled everything on. The rebellion was no longer a whisper in the shadows. It was a storm tearing through the Union's heart. Raphael crouched behind a column in a central plaza, surveying the unfolding scene. Civilians scattered as a squadron of Goran enforcers marched through the area, their energy rifles sweeping for targets. Behind them, towering mechs lumbered forward, their metallic limbs sparking with lethal energy. Raphael's jaw tightened. The Council's response was swift and merciless. Kaltir's voice crackled through Raphael's comm. Teams 1 and 2 have taken out the primary power relays. Security grids are down in sectors 7 through 10. Resistance is growing, but they're starting to push back hard. Hold the line, Raphael replied, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. We need more time to secure the broadcast station. Kaltir's acknowledgement was drowned out by a distant explosion, the tremor rippling through the deck. Raphael rose to his feet, scanning for his team. From a side corridor, a group of rebels emerged, led by the hulking figure of the Drakari fighter. The tusked warrior carried a makeshift plasma cannon, its barrel glowing faintly. Where do you need us? The Drakari rumbled, his deep voice cutting through the din. Raphael pointed to a nearby junction. The Goran are using that corridor to reinforce their positions. Block it off. Use everything you've got. The Drakari nodded and led his team forward without hesitation. Raphael turned his attention to the plaza's central spire, a towering structure that housed the station's primary communications hub. The spire was heavily guarded, with Goran troops stationed at every entry point. Taking it would be the rebellion's most dangerous move yet, but it was the key to spreading their message galaxy-wide. Kaltir's voice returned, strained but voidbreaker. We're nearing the spire, but the Goran have set up defensive turrets. We'll need a diversion. Raphael's mind raced. A diversion would mean putting more rebels in harm's way, but there was no other option. I'll handle it, he said. Focus on breaching the hub. Are you insane? Kaltir snapped. You're the face of this rebellion. If you die here... If I don't, we all lose, Raphael interrupted. Stick to the plan. Before Kaltir could protest further, Raphael cut the comm and sprinted toward a side entrance to the plaza. His disruptor pistol felt impossibly light in his grip as he moved, each step measured and deliberate. The echoes of battle surrounded him. Blaster fire, shouted orders, the dull roar of explosions. But his focus remained unbroken. Reaching a vantage point above the plaza, Raphael surveyed the Goran troops below. He spotted a cluster of energy conduits running along the plaza's edge. With a well-placed shot, he could overload the conduits and draw the enemy's attention. Raphael steadied his aim, his breath slow and controlled. He fired, the disruptor's pulse striking the conduits and triggering a chain reaction. Sparks flew, and a deafening explosion rocked the plaza, sending debris and smoke billowing into the air. The Goran forces immediately turned their attention to the blast, their ranks scattering to assess the damage. Raphael seized the opportunity, descending from his perch and weaving through the chaos. He fired sporadically, picking off guards and drawing their fire away from Kaltir's team. Diversion in place. Raphael said into his calm, "Move now." Kaltir's reply was immediate. "Copy that. We're moving in." The battle for the spire was brutal. Kaltir's team advanced with surgical precision, their Serani agility and Eurathian ingenuity countering the Goran's superior firepower. They breached the spire's outer defenses, cutting through the final barriers with plasma torches. Inside, the hub was a chaotic web of consoles and glowing screens, the nerve center of the Union's propaganda machine. Technicians scattered as the rebels stormed in, their hands raised in surrender. Kaltir motioned for his team to secure the room while the Serani technician worked on the primary console. Raphael arrived moments later, his uniform singed and his expression grim. "How long?" he asked the technician. 2 minutes, she replied, her fingers flying across the console's interface. "The system's heavily encrypted, but I can override it." Raphael glanced at Kaltir. "Hold this position no matter what. Once the broadcast goes out, the Union will throw everything they've got at us." Kaltir nodded, his blade already drawn. "We're ready." The seconds dragged on as the technician worked, the tension in the room palpable. Outside, the sounds of combat grew louder, signaling the Goran's approach. Raphael stepped to the console, his heart pounding as the technician gave a triumphant nod. "We're in." The console's interface lit up, displaying a galaxy-wide map. Raphael activated the transmitter, his voice steady as he spoke into the microphone. "This is Raphael Leo. To all who suffer under the Galactic Union's rule, hear this. You are not alone. The Council thrives on our division, our fear. But together, we are stronger than they ever imagined. Stand up. Resist. Fight for your freedom. The rebellion has begun, and it cannot be stopped." His words echoed across the spire and beyond, carried by the Union's own networks to every corner of the galaxy. The broadcast displayed images of the rebellion's victories. Workers striking, barricades rising, and Goran enforcers retreating under the pressure of united resistance. Raphael ended the transmission and turned to Kaltir. "We've done it." Kaltir grinned, but the moment was short-lived. A deafening explosion rocked the spire, and the room's lights flickered. Raphael's calm buzzed with frantic reports. "They're breaching the perimeter," a rebel shouted. "We're outnumbered." The transmission cut off, replaced by the ominous hum of approaching mechs. Kaltir glanced at Raphael, his expression hardening. "We're out of time." Raphael nodded. "We hold them off as long as we can. The message is out. That's what matters." The door to the hub burst open, and the first wave of Goran enforcers poured in. Raphael and the rebels stood their ground, their weapons blazing as they fought to protect what they had built. Each second felt like an eternity, but the fire of defiance burned bright in their eyes. As the battle raged, Raphael's voice rang out, steady and unyielding. For freedom, for the galaxy, the rebellion had ignited, and no amount of force could extinguish it now.